Before this video begins, I would like to take a quick moment to thank Bain Books for helping set up the interview that is in this video, and I would also like to apologize for the audio quality. When I was working in editing this video, I ran into some problems and I was not able to get the best audio quality. So you can still hear the interview, but it's just, you might have to turn up your volume a lot. I apologize for that. This was in no way the fault of the author or the publisher that helped set this up. This was my problem in editing, but I still hope that you enjoy the video.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I am very pleased to have David Weber, author of a ton of novels, including the Honor Harrington universe novels. Mr. Weber, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
So the first question I want to ask is about how did you get into the science fiction genre when it came to reading, and then also when it came into writing?
The first science fiction novel that I ever read, I was 10 years old. I had a broken arm. I'd read all of the Black Stallion novels, and I'd read all of the You Were There at the Battle of Lexington and Concord books, and I was kind of desperate for something to read. And my dad, on his bookshelf, had The Legion of Space, which was the very first science fiction novel that I ever read. It was written, I believe, in 1939, and it was, looking back on it, okay, it actually aged pretty well, and it provided the inspiration for a short story I did for Roger Zelazny's last anthology.
Really?
That was fun. And the second one, which I read immediately thereafter, was Gina's Homo by Sprague Buchanan and I think Sugar Mitchell, which was kind of got me locked in on reading science fiction. And then I went looking for the Heinlein juveniles and whatnot. Then I read Doc Smith's entire Lensman series, which my father had in hardcover, which anybody who reads my stuff now will see that I imprinted early on huge space battles. And
I would never have guessed.
Yeah. But that's how I got into reading it. Now, writing, I always, I intended to teach college history, and I was finishing my master's degree when I read a demographic survey of the field and found that over half of all tenured history positions were held by people who were 40 or younger, which explained why some of the professors that I had ended up at Appalachian State University instead of one of the big name universities. I was fortunate to have them, but that was where they'd been able to get tenure. So I figured I should rethink my plans. I planned to teach and write on the side. So I went back home, took over my mother's small advertising business, and did that for about 2 years. And I was doing some more game design at the time. And Steve White, who co-authored Insurrection, which was my first novel with me, he was up in Charlottesville, and he was involved with one of the gaming systems that I was working with. And my process was to write a short story before I started design on a game module, because that kind of helped me set the tone for what I wanted to do. So I wrote a short story, I sent it to Steve for a new game that I was working on that eventually became the Fourth Interstellar War from Task Force Games. But at any rate, Steve wrote a short story and sent it back. I wrote one, he wrote one, I wrote one, he wrote one, and I realized that what we were actually doing was writing chapters. And getting from that point through Avon Books and John Douglas, who was a wonderful editor but couldn't get it down to a length that the suits in the front office would let him buy. That's how I eventually wound up at Bain, which I think it was 1989 when they bought it. So I think they've been around for about 2 years at that point. So I've been with Bain a long time.
And your Honor Harrington series started with the novel On Basilisk Station.
Yeah, that's a reading title, not a pronouncing title.
I'm sorry?
That's a reading title, not a pronouncing title.
Okay.
A lot of people on Basilisk Station does not come trippingly from the tongue when you decide to tell somebody about it.
That book, it came out in '93. Is that right? That's what I looked.
I think that's correct. I think I wrote it I think both it and The Honor of the Queen came out in '93, like a month and a half apart, like 2 months apart, and one quarter next quarter, which was one of the, I think, smartest things Jim Bain did, because it hit the two books right on top of each other. It made it clear it was an ongoing series, and gave everybody kind of a double dose of the universe.
So that means that it's been out for 30 years this year. Has
Thank you. I'm feeling old already.
Well, I'm going to turn it into a compliment. So this series has been around for so long, and yet fans are sticking with it. Fans are always looking for the next one. They're ready for the next book to come out. How does that feel, and how does that affect how you write the series?
I don't think anybody who does a first book in a series anticipates that it's going to be, you're going to be writing in that same universe 30 years later. Okay, I mean, you're incredibly blessed if that happens. It's not something you can plan for. I am frequently just sort of, when I think about it, stop back and think about the number of people who read it. When I think of like the Royal Manticoran Navy fan group that is around, when I think about the support that I get, especially when I think about all the folks who are military who have written to tell me how much these books mean to them. And that means a lot to me. But I tell people, they say, you know, your books did this, your books did that, etc. And I tell people, you know, my books can't create anything in them that's not already there. Okay, I may write a book that touches on something that's in there, that brings something into focus, but I can't give them anything they don't already have in terms of who they are and what who they need to be is concerned. And it's I've actually had at least 2 people who have written to me and have told me that the books literally saved their lives because of where they were when they met them and whatnot. And that's kind of scary in a way, to know that. But something that Jim Butcher said many years ago online was, you know, when something like that happens, the author is like, wow, that's great. But the author can't take credit for that's why I wrote the book. Okay? You know, we can't say, well, we did it to change lives, we did it to do this. We did it to tell you a good story that we hope would be meaningful to you, with characters you cared about, dealing with things that you cared about. And if that resonates with you, if that does something for you, then that's icing on the cake. And we can't really take credit for it, we can just be glad it happened. Okay? And when a series has gone 30 years, you've got a lot of room for that kind of thing to happen. I will say that I think possibly the one of the greatest compliments I ever got on Honor Harrington, it was at EasterCon in the UK. It was a coffee clutch, and there was a guy there who hadn't said very much. And at the end of the coffee clutch, he came up and he shook hands with me. He said, "I wanted to thank you for the Grace of Armsman." And I said, "You're welcome." And he said, "I think it's the only case in science fiction I've seen that gets the relationship between the protectee and the detail correct." And I said, "Well, thank you." And then he handed me his card. He was with Buckingham Palace Security.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
That's why I said, okay, I must have got something right here.
For him to say that.
Yeah. You know, there are moments like that. And when you have a series that goes as long as Honor Harrington, that has as many books, has as many readers, there's more space for moments like that, if you know what I'm saying.
So the last Honor Harrington question I have is, I'm reading through the series myself. I'm really enjoying it. One book I particularly enjoyed was Field of Dishonor, which to me felt the most like a John Grisham book and a C.S. Forester Horatio Hornblower book.
Yeah.
Were those influences, or did you have influences when you were writing those?
Grisham I haven't really read very much. Forster, obviously, I read when I was younger. And I don't think Forster is so much a direct influence on Honor, because if we look at Honor, she's a lot less neurotic than
yes, she is.
Okay. I mean, I hadn't really thought about the fact that she has a physician parent, that kind of thing. Although I don't think we ever actually saw Hornblower's father at all in the series.
I don't think so.
But I did know that if the book worked, if the series worked, if Basilisk Station worked, then Forster and Hornblower would be inevitable comparisons.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'd already decided that Honor's first name was going to be Honor. And so I said, okay, what the hell? And started looking for a last name that would give me an H, and that's where the Harrington came from. I did not realize when I did that my future wife, who I met shortly after, shortly before I wrote these two books, she has scoliosis. And in one of her major surgeries, they put 2 Harrington rods into her spine. It's kind of like, we sort of have mixed feelings about that last name in our family. But actually, there's a new novel coming out from Bain in April, I think, called Toll of Honor, which goes back to the same time period as Field of Dishonor. And among other things, you get to see the whole duel from other people's perspective.
Yeah.
You get to see actually see La Follette swearing fealty to Honor as her armsman, and you also find out that where she knew La Follette from before he became her armsman. Okay, kind of thing. And I have to say that one of the things that I enjoy the most about being a series author is that I can have ongoing relationships between characters, like the one between Andrew and Honor. And the critical thing I think that a writer needs to remember is that people read books for the characters.
Right.
You may read them for other things as well, but if the characters aren't there, if the characters don't work for the reader, if the reader doesn't care about the characters, then the reader's not going to be in a big hurry to buy more books by the same author. And rightly so.
Right.
But I think that you don't have to like the characters. I mean, to me, it would be hard for me to write a series that was centered on characters I didn't like. And it would be hard for me as a reader to read a series centered on characters I didn't like. But you still have to care about the villains, even if it's just, I can't wait for this SOB to get his. Okay, you have to care about the villains. And I try really, really hard to... If I have a character in a book who's going to be spoken to by somebody or whatever for more than, just a couple of 4 pages, okay, I'm not going to call that character just the lieutenant. The character's going to have a name. The character's going to be addressed by that name. And in my notes, that character's going to have a physical description and an age and probably some little quirk that I need to remember about them going forward. That's just the way that I work. Drives some people crazy because there's so many named characters in David Weber novels. Okay, but one of the strengths of that is that I've got an incredibly deep bench. If I want to bring more characters, if I want to bring somebody back in, the entire Crown of Slaves series grew out of a character who is in 2 characters, but primarily just Anton Silwicki, who's in one section of one chapter of Short Victorious War. Okay, I mean that's it. He and his daughter are like that. It's one of the more powerful moments. It's his wife was the commander of the escort for the convoy that he and their daughter are in, and she dies defending the convoy. And the convoy is escaping. They know her ship's been destroyed, and he's holding his daughter and she's like 5, and she's like, is mommy all right? Are the peeps going to hurt us? And he says to her, it's okay, honey, we're safe. Mommy made us safe. Okay, and so that's it. Okay, but when Eric Flint was looking for a character to spin off a short story for In the Highlands, which eventually led to The Crown of Slaves, he zeroed in on Anton and the relationship with his daughter and went from there. When you build characters when you're writing the book, you can do that in a way that just going back and saying, well, I'm going to take this person who was just a name and turn them into a character, it doesn't have the resonance. It doesn't have the launch factor for the writer, much less for the reader, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. My next question is about another series that you've written, but this one's fantasy. This is your Oath of Swords series.
Yes.
How was, and this came out in the 90s, and I think some in the 2000s, how did this series differ in your writing style than, say, your big science fiction series?
From a writing perspective, I don't know that it really does. Okay, one thing that the fantasy novels do, and mentioning a non-Bain series, this is also true for the Safehold series with Tor. My characters don't spend all my time on starships. Okay, so I can build a lot more texture into their physical environment. I can spend more time building a living, breathing planet around them. And I think that in some ways that frees my writing. There are many, many passages in the Honor Harrington books, for example, where I'm dealing with that same sort of scene, but I spend so much time in vacuum. I spend so much time with missiles going back and forth and whatnot there, that vibrancy, in a way, is more difficult to inject into, especially the narrative prose of what you're doing. So I think in that respect, there's probably a difference between the two from a writing perspective. From a story perspective, I'll be honest with you, I think that if you are a competent writer, okay, then the genre should matter less than the tools that you bring to writing. And if you look at the fantasy novels, if you look at the science fiction, I'm still building characters the same way. I'm still building, hopefully they're all different characters. It's not like I'm recycling the same person and just changing the names. But I'm building the characters and their relationships and their challenges the same way. The technology is different, but the basic story writing tools that I bring to the table are the same. Now, one thing that is very much in my fantasy and my science fiction, before I started writing any of the books in the series, I figured out what the background for the characters, their societies, the kingdoms, and whatever are, and I also figured out how the technology worked. You have to be consistent with how the technology works, and you have to understand how that works before you're going to be in a position to make a series stand up. Okay, and I do think that the basis for magic in Norfresa is substantially different from the background of the magic in most of the stories, most of the novels that I've read by other fantasy authors, in that I'm basically doing quantum physics with non-physical tools to manipulate it.
Right.
That led to some interesting consequences when I started thinking about how that would work when I was setting it up. But I think one of the huge things that makes the fantasy novels work is the relationship between Bazel and Tomanek. And it's like somebody said to me, I'm not used to the notion of a paladin, basically telling his god to piss off when his god is trying to recruit him. That doesn't usually happen, kind of thing. I was like, well, I just thought about me, my life. But the fantasy novels and the Safehold novels both deal explicitly with something that is implicit in a lot of my fiction, and that is the tension between free will and religious belief and individual responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I think those are elements that draw a lot of people to the books, because we would really, really like to have political leaders, for example, like Elizabeth Winton or Eloise Pritchard in the renewed People's Republic. And there really are people out there on virtually all sides of every political divide who have that sense of responsibility, that sense of commitment. They may not agree with each other, they may be violently opposed to one another, they're there. But the problem is that we've gotten so partisan right now, and so polarized, and so black and white, soundbite moment determined, that all we see is the chaos. All we see are the grifters and the scam artists, and they're on both sides of every question as well. Yeah. And I think what some of the appeal of the books is that I don't have to put up with a 24/7 soundbite news cycle. If it bleeds, it leads. Give me your dirty laundry approach to what I'm doing in the books. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think that resonates, and I hope to God it does, because that's our better side. That sense of what brings us together rather than what drives us apart. Mm-hmm. And we lose sight of that so easily. And I have characters in the books who are doing their best to drive wedges and everything else, and then Honor gets to shoot most of them on the dueling ground or something. It's kind of like, I don't want to say that that's my emphatic statement about how we should deal with them, but
how you can do it in the books, though.
Yeah, I can do it in the books. Yeah.
So you have also written a series with Jacob Hollow, mm-hmm. That started with the Gordian Protocol.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how that series came about and where the series is right now?
All right, well, going back to 1991. Okay. At that point, Jim Bain had bought about 5 novels from me, mm-hmm. And I think 2 of them had been published at that point. And he said, Dave, your books all seem to be spawning sequels. Said, so why don't you consider the possibility of, I don't know, planning a series from the get-go? And I said, well, that's you should pardon the expression, novel concept. So I gave him 10 proposals for series. Mm-hmm. One of them was Honor Harrington. I didn't know when I handed it to him that he'd been for 20 years looking for somebody to do Horatio Hornblower in space. Mm-hmm. So he didn't really bother to get much past Honor Harrington is a 6'2" Eurasian starship captain for the Star Kingdom of Manticore. He's like, okay, bye. He's writing books to two book country. Oh, 3, hell, make it 4, which was huge at that point for me, So I was like, okay, I can do this. All right, now among the other proposals was what became Safehold, mm-hmm. Okay, and what became the Gordian Protocol. Yeah. So that idea is 30 plus years old.
Wow.
Okay, but the Honor Harrington books and these books and those books, and so I can't complain, but I just never got around to being able
You've
to
been
write
busy.
the books. Yeah. So I met Jacob and his wife Heather at a small comic book store, actually, in Greenville, and we really liked them. And I talked to him, and I knew that he had done some indie books. I'd read 3 or 4 of his indies. And so I said, well, you know what? And we were at Ruby Tuesdays, and I said, Jacob, I got a proposal for you. He's like, yeah. And I said, how would you like to, collaborate with me on this series? And he kind of says, yeah, kind of thing. So I didn't find out until after we'd written the book that he had always sworn that the one thing he would never write was a time travel novel. I said, well, Jacob, kind of like, but
You're wrong.
well, and Jacob is he's an engineer. That's his background. He's with BMW. He's very, very good at just about everything that he does. And so I told him what the concept that I had for the Gordian Protocol was. And I asked him I said, I want you to design the tech and the societies. Because one thing that is a problem for most authors is by the time they've been doing this for 20, 30 years, they reach for a set of tech tools that are comfortable to them when they're structuring a technology base. That's one reason why I had Tom Pope and Tim Zahn move, well, especially Tom primarily, move the technology for the Star Kingdom books, for the Manticore Ascendant books, further back, instead of me doing it myself, because I wanted that different feel for that tech from that earlier period. So I told Jacob, and Jacob just went crazy. He was like, oh man, I can design this. And so he did it. He said he just knew I was going to tell him. And, oh no, that's too much. That's over the top. So I said, oh, this is great. So that's for the technology for the Gordian Protocol. I knew what I needed the technology to do. Okay, Jacob went off and figured out how to make it do it. And then he started thinking about logical implications of the technology and where that would put us for other parts of it, which was great. But again, the crux of I think if you actually looked at what goes into my building a hero character, the number one thing that goes in, the very first thing in the mix, is that sense of responsibility. Okay, if you look at Honor Harrington, for example, if it's her fault, she'll move heaven and earth to make it right. If it's somebody else's fault, she'll still move heaven and earth to make it right. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. The thing is, there's a problem, and adults solve problems. Okay, that's their job, is to solve problems. And so in the Gordian Protocol, the real key character in the Gordian Protocol is Benjamin Schroeder, who is a history professor who finds himself in a universe in which Adolf Hitler was assassinated in 1940. And so World War II ended very, very abruptly. In a civil war in Germany and so forth, and then a war against the Soviet Union 10 years later. Stalin was taken out. There was never a Chinese Revolution. There was never Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay, this whole thing. There's never a Holocaust. Okay, so he's in another universe, and this guy knocks on his door and says, "Hi, I'm a time traveler from the 23rd century. And you have to help me fix a little problem. And if we don't prevent Hitler's assassination, 15 universes are going to die in 10,000 years. Oh my. And he has a Polish girlfriend whose parents would have died in the camps. Grandparents would have died in the camps. And he has to grapple with, you want me to be responsible for the Holocaust, you want me to be responsible for 100 million people being killed, you want me to do all of this. And I can't do it. And his girlfriend, when she finally finds out what's going on, his fiancée, she says, you have to do it. And he says, but you don't understand, if I do that, you won't exist. And she says, do you think I want to exist knowing 15 universes will die because I did? Oh my. Okay. That's the crux of the novel, and the choice that he's confronted with. And I really wanted to write the books, but I never had the time to do it. Jacob has been a marvelous writing partner. I have really, really enjoyed working with him, and I don't know if it has been officially announced anywhere, but I will announce it here if it hasn't. Jacob will be doing an Honorverse trilogy with me, which will be the story of Edward Saganami, the patron saint of the Royal Manticore Navy. So I'm really looking forward to that. He and Tom Pope have been they've had their heads together. It's like a convention of geeks, they're like, wow, this is great. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, that's wonderful. And so the upcoming book is Toll of Honor, which is coming next year.
Yes.
And is that coming out? Is that in trade paperback, or is that?
I'm assuming it will be hardcover, but I don't know yet.
Okay.
And because that's a Bain decision.
Gotcha.
I would not be surprised. It's actually Toll of Honor. There's only one chapter in the entire book. Well, there's maybe two. That is primarily from Honor's perspective at all. But you do get a very different, and you find out one of the reasons that I wrote the book is that I think a lot of people don't realize that Pavel Young and his father and the Conservative Association are the reason the war wasn't over within 18 months. Okay. And everything that happened after that, all the millions of people who were killed, died largely because these guys paralyzed the Royal Manticoran Navy at a time when the People's Republic was in hopeless disarray. And they could have achieved a really quick, decisive victory, except they weren't allowed to because of this political dogfight that was all being waged to save one absolute scumbag of a human being. And that was one of the things that I wanted to touch on a little more in this book. The Honorverse became big enough in terms of the scale and the scope, that there are all manner of corners of it that are just begging to be explored and filled in. And I'm 71 in October, so but one that I do definitely want to write. I think probably my next Honorverse novel would be the story of Alfred Harrington's career as a Marine, which gets touched on. Let's put it this way. Honor Harrington is not the most dangerous Harrington. Her big teddy bear of a dad is the most dangerous Harrington. And one of the reasons that he winds up in the Navy and a physician is because he finds himself in a situation where the only solution is to kill a bunch of people, and he's way too good at it. And he's like, I can't do this. I can't let this be me, right? Kind of thing. But yeah, it's you really don't want to get on his bad side. I want to write that story because I did a story for the anthology Beginnings, in which it's Alfred meets Honor's mom, okay, and how they wind up. And also, by the way, the relationship between Honor, between Alfred and Allison, is the reason that Alfred was never adopted by a tree cat. I don't know if people have picked up on that, but the tree cat adoption slot, he bonded with Allison instead. And see, a lot of people, that's one reason I wrote the story, because a lot of people hadn't picked up on why her parents were on such a vibe. And a lot of people also don't realize, because I don't think I've ever actually expressly told anybody, but it's the genetic contribution from both sides of Honor's family that are the reason that she developed the empathic sense that she shares with the tree cats. Okay? And you have to bear in mind that she now has a son who is being raised by tree cats. So Rahul's going to be a handful, But yeah, that's where we are on that. My next solo project, is going to have to be the sequel to Through Fiery Trials for Tor in the Safehold universe. But my next Bain solo novel is not going to be Honorverse. It's going to be the sequel to Sword of the South. And there are, in my original concept, there were 5 books in that story arc. I'm not sure that there will be 5 condition I'm around. But I will say this: people who are upset with me with the number of people I killed in the Honor Harrington books are going to be really pissed with me by the time we get to the end of that series.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the channel and talking with me today.
You're very welcome.
And you can find all of his books in bookstores everywhere and online. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.